Imagine a time in Formula One where we had 6 and 7 world champions all fighting each other at the top. Well, this is the story of how Formula One's greatest era ended, and it ended all during the new regulations. The story begins in 2012. Michael Schumacher sat 15th in the World Championship and had his latest shunt of the season at the Singapore Grand Prix. Things weren't looking good for him, and eventually the axe went on him. Michael Schumacher was going to be out of Formula One. Even worse for race leader Lewis Hamilton, he suffered yet another DNF from McLaren and was getting seriously frustrated by McLaren's lack or capabilities of actually finishing a race in what was then Formula One's fastest car. At the end of the season, he would only finish 2 points ahead of Jenson Button. Michael Schumacher announced his retirement at the Japanese Grand Prix. Schumacher, who had offers from Lotus and Sauber, was leaving the sport, and that was the first moment F1's greatest era began to end. Lewis Hamilton also announced that he was leaving McLaren and joining Mercedes. That was another huge moment. F1's greatest era was basically anywhere between 2006 to 2012. That was when F1 was at its peak. And then eventually all of the old famous Formula One drivers, their era came to an end. However, in 2012, we got Kimi Raikkonen back in the sport, and he managed to pick up a win in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix that year and managed to beat the fastest car of Lewis Hamilton to P3 in the World Championship. He was going really fast, but he wasn't as fast as he once was. However, that wouldn't be revealed until the 2014 season. Meanwhile, Sebastian Vettel won a third consecutive World Championship. Red Bull now won 3 championships in a row too, and everything was looking good. Jenson Button won the final race of the year in Brazil. However, little did he know that that'd be the last time he would ever stand on the podium again. And for Fernando Alonso, he saw the World Championship slip away, but little did he know that would be the last time he would be fighting for a World Championship, as everything headed to 2013, the last year of the old regulations, and it began with controversy. Mark Webber, Sebastian Vettel, Jenson Button, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Felipe Massa, they are the names of the old Formula One era. And Mark Webber announced he was retiring from the sport, which might have begun in Malaysia, where multi-2-1 Sebastian Vettel didn't follow the rule, and Mark Webber lost what could have been his final win. Things were dire for McLaren too. Jenson Button didn't even finish on the podium this year whatsoever, as McLaren struggled. Button was aiming for the 2013 World Championship, but their car just simply wasn't good enough. Meanwhile, Sebastian Vettel destroyed the field, winning 13 times for Red Bull Racing. Those 9 Grand Prix at the end of the year meant that any hope of a faint title challenge disappeared, and we saw Hamilton in a Mercedes fight Fernando Alonso in the Ferrari. Alonso did something absolutely spectacular and finished second in the World Championship. However, things were about to change. 2014, strictly speaking, is the end of the old era of Formula One. This is the year where all of the great legends of the sport basically had an off year, bar Lewis Hamilton. With Mark Webber gone, Lewis Hamilton completely crushed the field, winning 11 races and finishing more than 50 points ahead of his closest competitor, his teammate Nico Rosberg. Mercedes dominated, but on the few occasions they stumbled, there had to be someone to pick up the pieces. Take Spa. Hamilton and Rosberg collided, and the man to pick up the pieces was Daniel Ricciardo. He had replaced his fellow Aussie Mark Webber in the Red Bull seat and was teammates of reigning world champion Sebastian Vettel. He's won 3 wins that year and managed to keep the title chase all the way to the end of the season, as he finally fell out of it with 2 rounds to go. That was an impressive feat for Red Bull, as he picked up those 3 wins, and it all began at Canada, his first win, but potentially his greatest win of all came at the Hungarian Grand Prix, where Mercedes suffered. Ricciardo beat home Fernando Alonso that day. That would be the best result of the season for Ferrari, who suffered an absolute dreadful car. It was an absolute shocker. Alonso managed to finish just behind Sebastian Vettel in the World Championship yet again. What I like to think of 2014 is that Vettel and Alonso had a fight in the championship again, but this time it was only for P5 in the standings. Ferrari's Alonso at least managed to beat fellow world champion Kimi Raikkonen, who had an absolute shocking season. The question marks were all over Kimi's future in the sport and in his team. This was the world champion who would beat home Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso and fought Michael Schumacher during his domination. Things weren't looking good. However, Raikkonen may have been destroyed by Alonso, but Vettel was also destroyed by his young teammate Daniel Ricciardo. Vettel finished 5th in the World Championship, and if you see Daniel Ricciardo in 2024, then it just sums up really, in fact, how bad was Vettel in 2014. In fact, he wasn't far off his teammate in one lap, but particularly the thing is I find funny about it is every time Daniel Ricciardo won a race, he was actually behind Sebastian Vettel during the race at one point. Vettel qualified ahead in all of those races, and then in the end he slipped behind and never won a single race. So the last race of the 2013 season, the Brazilian Grand Prix, was the last time Sebastian Vettel won a race for Red Bull. Alonso and Vettel then decided to leave their teams. Vettel was going to join Ferrari, and Alonso was joining McLaren to teammate McLaren's struggling Jenson Button. A new era began. Whilst 2014 was seen as the end for Vettel and Alonso in their old teams, we got to see Alonso and Button teammates. Button and Alonso suffered an absolute horrendous years. McLaren's 2014 season, which saw them pick up a double podium in the season opener for Australia, although Button was never actually on the podium as it was a post-race disqualification for Daniel Ricciardo that helped them inherit it. It was still a good result. However, 2015 was horrendous. Alonso retired from pretty much every single race there was, and even had a famous picture of him in Brazil after yet another retirement. However, Button managed to beat Fernando Alonso in the World Championship, becoming the first teammate to beat Hamilton and Alonso in the championship. As for Sebastian Vettel, things looked up. Ferrari managed to claim 3 wins that year, and Vettel in 2015 was the one Hamilton actually beat in the United States to seal the World Championship. Vettel was second in this championship at that point of the season and actually needed to be the one to keep the title fight alive, not his teammate Nico Rosberg. Vettel's poor end to the year, being outclassed by Raikkonen in Abu Dhabi, meant Rosberg snuck back into second place. But Vettel was learning in that Ferrari, and only things looked up. Kimi Raikkonen still had a dismal season. At the start of the year, he was on Sebastian Vettel's level, and things actually looked up for him, especially since he was very impressive in Bahrain. But it all fell away. Mercedes dominated for yet another year, with Hamilton on an absolute another planet, at least until the final few races of the year. Vettel and Hamilton were now seen as the present of Formula One, and they were back. 2016 is a year where all of the big drivers of the last 6 years suffered poor years. Jenson Button had one of his worst seasons at McLaren as he was completely outclassed by Fernando Alonso. However, Button announced that he was retiring from the sport before the Italian Grand Prix weekend. Him retiring from the sport was a huge blow, and it showed how uncompetitive McLaren had become. Alonso finished 10th in the championship that year, the highest he would ever finish in his McLaren years. Even worse for Lewis Hamilton, he lost the World Championship by 5 points after dominating the 2015 standings. He won 10 races that year, but bad luck and mistakes cost him. Overall in performance, Hamilton was a lot better than Rosberg, but his mistakes and unreliability cost him dearly. Sebastian Vettel also had a dismal year, nearly being outscored by Kimi Raikkonen and suffering terribly as Ferrari should have finished second in the Constructors. 2017 was the year that changed everything. This time, Sebastian Vettel, despite all of the struggles of the last 3 years, and Lewis Hamilton, who wanted to bounce back after 2016, was basically 2 drivers who wanted to get back on form after a dismal previous season, came together for the World Championship. They collided, but there was loads of respect between them too, and Vettel and Hamilton was seen as the sport's new rivalry. The old 2010 title fight had been revived, and these 2 were now dueling for the World Championship. However, Sebastian Vettel's Formula One career started to go down the drain, especially as he just lost the championship lead after the Italian Grand Prix, and heading into the Singapore Grand Prix, Vettel was on pole with Hamilton 5th. Of course, we all know what happened that day, and he ended up well behind. Jenson Button made a one-off appearance in McLaren for his final Formula One race, and that ended in DNF. Fernando Alonso skipped that race and had another poor year. 2018, though, was the year Sebastian Vettel's form finally shattered down. A side note is that Felipe Massa retired at the end of the 2017 campaign after another lacklustre year, nearly being outscored by Lance Stroll, which isn't an achievement. Vettel and Hamilton duelled again for the World Championship, but Vettel, this time definitely the fastest car, crashed far too much, including slip-ups in France, China, Azerbaijan, Italy, United States Grand Prix, Japanese Grand Prix, and of course Germany. Fernando Alonso are tied from the sport too, and this was the scene as the moment where Alonso and Vettel, the old rivals of the last 10 years, finally disappeared from the sport. Alonso finished 11th in the championship, especially since that was pretty impressive considering how far they were from 2017, but it wasn't, since Alonso was 4th in the championship after the first 2 races of the year, and might have been even higher had Bahrain gone even better. Now it is time to fast forward years. As we go past all of the years, we're going to arrive in 2024. Sebastian Vettel's Formula One career did come to a bitter end. In the 2019 season, he finished 5th in the World Championship, beaten by Charles Leclerc by a significant amount in qualifying too. 2020 went even worse as Vettel was dominated in the championship as he finished 13th 10 years after his first World Championship triumph. He joined Aston for 2021 and then eventually announced his retirement in 2022. But the thing is we never really saw Sebastian Vettel return. What had happened, well, we don't really know, but I think it was all of the psychological defeat that was burned up in him during 2017 Singapore and 2018 Germany. I think after 2018 Germany, we never got to see old Sebastian Vettel back. Maybe in that last lap in Abu Dhabi, we really did see Sebastian Vettel come back for the one last qualifying lap. But I think the defeat Vettel suffered as he made far too many mistakes, so his Formula One career ended in a bad way. As for Hamilton, he continued to dominate the next 2 championships, but then fatally lost out to Verstappen as Hamilton's slip-ups in the first half of the year allowed Verstappen to gain a significant amount. However, Verstappen then made some mistakes and then they were nip and tuck and he lost the championship on the last lap. Mercedes then struggled and Hamilton failed to win again until 2024, but by then his form had slipped as he was absolutely destroyed by George Russell in the World Championship. Hamilton ended his Mercedes career with a P4 and then joined Ferrari in 2025, which went. Alonso then returned to Formula One in 2021 for Alpine and scored a famous podium in 2021 too in Qatar, and then came back to Aston for 2023 and then became a regular contender at the front of the field, scoring many podiums. Hamilton also had a good year this year, especially after his lackluster P6 in the 2022 season, but neither of them won again, but at least we got to see their famous battles from 10 years ago continue at Canada, and of course they had to fight at the Bahrain Grand Prix. It was almost as if the old Formula One era was coming back. However, 2024 was a different story as Alonso slips in the middle part of the year, cost him out a Stroll, and then he crashed in Brazil. We now head to 2025 and the future. Only Hamilton and Alonso remain from the old era of Formula One, and the chances are is that they're not going to be along for much longer. Hamilton and Alonso are the only 2 remaining, and it looks as if we're in a new era now of Norris and Max Verstappen. Of course, we have the old era of Hamilton, Rosberg, Vettel, Raikkonen, and Ricciardo, all there too, but that era faded away. A side note, Kimi Raikkonen won the 2018 US Grand Prix and retired in 2021. In my opinion, this is Formula One's greatest era, but do you agree? Let me know in the comments, like and subscribe if you enjoy, and I'll see you next time.